The topic of the Erev Rav is a very sensitive one. Is a very difficult one, especially today, not really all through the ages. They first appear in Parshas Bo, and we've spoken about that before. When Moshe Rabbeinu takes the Jewish people out of Mitzrayim, it mentions at that time, it's the first time you hear about the Erev Rav in the Chumash, that the Erev Rav went out with the Jewish people from Mitzrayim, and it seems innocent enough. We only find out later on in this week's Parsha that it was not the advice of Hashem to do so. Hashem didn't have to do it. Moshe did it on his own, and we have been paying the price of that ever since. And of all the mistakes for Moshe to make, that was like a catastrophic one, which needs to be understood. And they're the source of the golden calf in this week's parsha. They're the ones who take advantage of the situation to get the Jewish people riled up, get them nervous, get them worried. Moshe, they say, is late. He was not late, but it seemed like he was late. And Rashi brings down the medrash that the Sitra Achar, the Satan, was Mebalbel, the world, confounded everybody, created a chaotic, nerve-wracking, desperate situation that didn't cause all the Jewish people. On the contrary, the vast majority of Jewish people did not get involved in the golden calf, just about 3,000 Jews, stragglers, spiritual stragglers, who got involved. The Erev Rav were the main perpetrators, and there's a lot of Kabbalah behind this whole thing. The Exile and Shar Gagulim talks about how the miracles involved, and also that the sons of Bilam were part of the Erev Rav, and they came out of Mitzrayim with the Jewish people, troublemakers from the beginning. And how the whole of the golden calf coming out eating grass was all part of trying to elevate their grandfather, who had reincarnated as grass, because that's what happens to a person if they really mess up badly in their lifetime. The average person who tries to be a good person, tries to do things right, doesn't abuse life. So when they reincarnate into another human being. That's usually the way reincarnation works. But it is possible if a person is really bad to work their way up the chain once again, so you can come back as a stone. Bilam came back as a stone, inside a stone. He wasn't the stone itself, but he was trapped inside the stone for a period of time, which is not a comfortable thing to have happen, until he merited to go up, to the next level, which is called Somech. That's Domim, which is called silent, and Somech is the vegetation world. So you come back as grass, perhaps, get eaten by the cow, which is a chaya, and by being eaten by the cow, it elevates the grass or the sparks in the grass to a higher level. Then the cow gets eaten by the human being, if they're not a vegetarian, unless it's a. But the and that eating of the cow elevates the sparks to the level of medaber to human being, and then the person can come back in the next lifetime as a human being, and continue with the rectification. Be a very long process, but it can happen. And that apparently was what the story with Bilam, his father, and then his grandsons. That's a whole side story. That's a discussion for another time, perhaps. But the main point was that the golden calf, it represented a lot of things. On a simple level, the golden calf is like, it takes on the responsibility of a yoke to actually plow the field. So a calf represents like a youthfulness, and gold represents eternal. So it's like eternal youthfulness without the need to have any kind of moral responsibility. And there's other things, all kinds of other things involved with it, and so many lessons to be learned from it. But the main thing is that the Erev Rav, this is their debut, really. This is where they really, they're having an impact the entire time. They're complaining, fetching, they're instigating, according to the Orach Chaim, that's why they were sent. They were sent by Paro specifically to cause these problems, to cause these difficulties, to get people riled up so they wouldn't want to go away from Mitzrayim. Originally, he thought they were going for 3 days, not forever. And to make sure that they would not go forever, he sent the Erev along to try to get them to cause the Jewish people to become homesick, if you can imagine such a thing, and come back to Mitzrayim. Others say not like that. The Rizal clearly doesn't say like that. He says that the Erev Rav actually were converts. Moshe converted them, and they, even before leaving Mitzrayim, they had already gravitated towards the Jewish people, and that's also a discussion that we need to have, B'ezras Hashem, but where they came from, why this happened, why as Egyptians did they begin to relate more to the Jewish people, at least to the descendants of Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, more than to their own people. Where did that come from? And how does that play into the entire picture? So they do this thing, this terrible thing, and of course, another question is why weren't they all wiped away? Did some Erev Rav not get involved? Why was it the Jews who were punished, the ones who got involved with, and because the Erev Rav continues on. They're still there in the midbar even after that. So maybe some didn't get involved. It's hard to believe. Or maybe because of the fact that they weren't commanded like the Jewish people were commanded in the mitzvah of Avodah Zorah, things like that, that maybe they weren't held as responsible. I don't know. I don't know. It's a good question that I'm sure many ask, but excuse me, but lots of questions in these parshiyot. But the Gra, really the Zohar, is the first to talk about this in Bereshit on Chov He, I think Amid Aleph or Amid Beis, where it talks about the Erev Rav as part of the discussion going on, because the Zohar goes from topic to topic to topic, and then brings up the discussion about the Erev Rav. It mentions that there's actually 5 categories of Erev Rav, and there will be, and this is by Sheni. This is the second base of Mikdash. This is long after Tanakh is closed. You don't mention, as far as I can see, as far as I know, the Erev Rav is not mentioned anywhere in the Nevi'im, and certainly not in Kesuvim, but not in the Nevi'im anywhere. There's enemies and bad people, but they seem to have integrated into the Jewish people at some point in time, and they're no longer identified as a separate entity, but the Zohar does do that, and the Exile says in Shari HaGilgulim that they reincarnate in the final generation together with Moshe Rabbeinu, who's going to be the Mashiach. At least his neshama will come back as the engine of Mashiach. And then you have the Dor Midbar, the generation of that went out with Moshe Rabbeinu and the Erev. They also come. Everyone comes back at the end of history one more time, fix things up. But they, until the Zohar, you don't find a whole lot mentioned about them. Maybe here once in a while if someone uses the term, but it seems to be more of a label than an actual reality. But from the Zohar, you see it's a clear-cut reality, and its prediction about how they are going to be the proverbial thorn in the side of the Jewish people, the proverbial thorn in the eye of the Jewish people, causing all kinds of problems. And when you read the different categories, they actually have names of biblical nations like Amalek and Anakim and Nephilim and Rephaim, and the other one is, I forget, but they're characteristics. These are specific traits. For example, not wanting to take care of the Torah world, having the money to do so, and not wanting to take care of the Torah world according to the Zohar is an Erev Rav trait. Or imposing leadership, selfish leadership on Jewish communities that's not in consonance with Torah values and more to do with these are Erev Rav things. Even just building a Beit Knesset or sponsoring a Torah for the sake of personal glory is also a trait of an Erev Rav person. So these are things that we all agree these are not things that good people do, but Erev Rav is a very, very serious accusation. And the Gra, it's almost 1,700 years later, he just reiterates and repeats the entire whatever the Zohar says and goes into even more detail about that. And he says the following thing. This is in Kol HaTorah, which of course is controversial because it was never published as a sefer per se in the time of the Gra, because it was only meant to be notes. There's some background to the sefer. Only meant to be notes for his Talmidim. Why? Because it's known the Vilna Gaon at the age of 20, which is I think 1740, which is 5500 in the Jewish from creation, is the Zohar says that's already the Erev Shabbos of the last millennium, the last day of history, so to speak, and it's the Messianic time. It's already what we call the final generation, even though there's still plenty of time to live out, and from 5,000 onward. Okay, but anyhow, the Cheshbon, you can look at it. But the point is, the Gra realized already at that time we had to start focusing on getting back to Eretz Yisrael, rebuilding the Yishuv. The Gula was on its way, already back in the 1700s and early 1800s. Clearly, So he began to train his students. His focus became, at least for this group of students, to go to Eretz Israel and start the process of rebuilding the Yishuv, which was crazy at that time because, the place was impoverished, it was barren, it was dangerous. I mean, it was just simply dangerous between marauders and just murderous thieves and all that, plus the fact that to plant food and to grow crops, and it was a huge risk and took tremendous Mesiras Nefesh, self-sacrifice, but they did it. And it was not easy. They almost didn't do it, but they started off. And the Gra had to train them and give them the inspiration to survive this. So he taught them all kinds of interesting ideas that only the Vilna Gaon could do. Well, not entirely true, but certainly very much along the lines of how the Gra thought, and he writes another Sforim. And so they weren't published because it wasn't meant to be public information. And eventually, these manuscripts and these notes were passed down in the families themselves from generation to generation. And sometime around the 1950s, they came across these manuscripts, or they brought them out. I'm not exactly sure the entire story, and they published them. And what happened was, it's actually kind of ironic, but what happened was that because there was at that time also kind of a conflict between the Haredi world, so to speak, and the non-Haredi world, whether it was religious Zionists or not religious Zionists, about the importance of Eretz Israel in 1948, and the Gula was coming and all that, and because it was set up by a secular government, by secular people, Ben Gurion, Jabotinsky, all those people. So it was kind of hard to believe, especially and this goes back, first of all, to the World Zionist Conference at the end of the 1800s, where things start to fall apart because we cannot agree on what type of state it should be. Of course, it has got to be a Torah state. There's nothing to talk about. But the secular side said, no way. We want to be like Europe. We want to, and they still say that. That's their whole kivum. So it became clear it wasn't going to work out. So they went different directions. The Haredim said, forget it. We're there anyhow. We're already from the time of the Gra. We'll just develop our own yishuv in our own way. And the Chilinim went off and did their thing. And eventually the state was declared in 1948. And they said, you mind your business, we'll mind our business. Kind of that's the way it worked out. Whether we actually liked it or believed that, the rest is modern history. But from that point onward, so anything to do with the secular approach to a Jewish state, don't forget, Herzl was prepared to take Uganda. If he hadn't died, that's where he and his colleagues would have founded the modern Jewish state. And that's not where I would have gone, that's for sure. It didn't happen. But they just was no way to really work together. And to this very day, that war is ongoing in one capacity or another. There have been some positive breakthroughs from time to time, but it's still something that tears the country apart to some degree. Part of Ichlis and Mashiach, without question, it's unavoidable based upon Jewish history. It's not new by any stretch of the imagination, but it's part of the process of the Chevli Mashiach until we get to finally fixing everything up. But so as a result of that, when the notes came out, that basically said, Eretz Israel, especially at the end, going back is so all important, Kibbutz Galius, and so when these came out, so the religious Zionists specifically said, you see, even the Vilna Gaon, your own Vilna Gaon, says the same thing that we're saying. Right? That did not go over very well at all, and so there was just denial. That is not, when I said denial, I don't mean the one in Egypt, although he came from that one, but I mean, forget it. The Gemara didn't say it, he didn't write it, we don't have any proof, the book wasn't published, and even though there are a lot of very important people weighed in on behalf of the Sefer, like Rav Chaim Friedlander, for example, the Rosh Panovich, in Bnei Brak, and other individuals, and that even though it's been sourced, and you can find many of the same things that the Gemara speaks about in Kol HaTorah elsewhere, nevertheless, because of the controversy, because of what was at stake, it never got resolved for a lot of people, and so many was taboo, and it's out. It's not really authentic. While others embraced it. The information, some of it is clearly new. meaning that we don't talk about these things. In short, the Sefer is really about Mashiach ben Yosef, being Mashiach ben Yosef, like how to act in that capacity, how to recognize someone who might be acting that capacity, what to do, to further and advance the cause of redemption, which the Rav felt clearly, based on the Zohar, was underway from his time onward. And the Sefer details a lot of things that can be done proactively in order to be able to do that. And that's not where the firm world, for the most part, was coming from, or even really wants to come from. We're waiting for Mashiach. The idea is to preserve Torah, which we have to do as much as possible. That means build yeshivas, teach Torah, whether it's here, whether it's in Lakewood, whether it's in Gateshead. It doesn't make a difference. The main thing is that Torah is being learned. If you happen to be in Eretz Israel, and you're learning the Mir, for example, or Panovich, or some very important places, lots of good yeshivas that not so well known, Baruch Hashem. Great, fantastic. Ein Torah, Kimot Torah, Eretz Israel, fantastic. But you don't have to be, per se, because the main thing is to keep Torah going and keep it alive, and Eretz Israel is very secondary at this point in time. Mashiach comes, that's when we'll know to go back, and that's when we will go back, maybe perhaps on flying carpets, maybe the shuls will fly us there. And that's been the mode for the most part. And I know, because when I used to go on speaking trips and bring this topic up, there's a lot of backlash a lot of times when you try to promote the idea of proactively doing something to do the process. But that doesn't surprise me, especially if you learn Kabbalah, because we know that's what the Sitra Achra does. That's what happens. Within the Torah world, outside the Torah world, whatever he can to stop. He doesn't care, as long as he can slow down and stop. Hopefully, from his perspective, the Gula process doesn't make a difference who he uses, what he uses. He could even do it on high levels that we would be surprised to find out that thing's taking place. And that's where mistakes get made. And that's why things happen. It's all part of a larger, bigger picture that goes way beyond anything that we can understand in our world. It's God's master plan for creation. But on an everyday level, that's the way it seems to play out. So any safer specifically that's going to address those issues, those things that we can do to proactively shorten, weaken the term of the Sitra Achra. He's against Gula completely, because the moment the Gula comes, he's over. He's finished. There's no world anymore for the Sitra Achra, because there's no need for free will. And once free will is over, so the evil is gone from the world, and God is one, and all these things. And so it's his job to fight against the Gula process. So this is one of the few svarim that exists in Jewish history that so proactively tell you what you can do to enhance the process, to expedite the process of Geula, and things that even so far as to say that even though the Gemara seems to imply that Mashiach ben Yosef will die in the process of doing all this, that we can actually mitigate that according to the Gemara and the Ramchal by doing as much as we can in advance of arrival. And that includes Eretz Israel becoming a state. You can fit so many different things into that, especially when you look at all the Hashgacha Pratis involved in all of that. But one of the main factors that we have to deal with, which is why the Gra spends a lot of time in this Sefer, dealing with it, because it's such an important, essential part. We see it today. We wouldn't have known it, let's say, 25, 30, 40 years ago. I mean, this Sefer is now, when the material apparently is hundreds of years old. And yet it's describing a situation that's only been occurring in our time, which is pretty remarkable. This is what he says, okay? He says, Beis Mashiachin Heim. There are two Mashiachs, Mashiach ben Yosef and Mashiach ben David. We know that. There's no surprise there. In every generation, there's a potential for both. Mashiach ben Yosef, as is brought down, he's the one who fights against Amalek. He's the one who, according to the Shem Shmuel, he gets the nation already prepared for Mashiach ben David. And Mashiach ben David, he fights against Yishmael, the Arab world, according to the Gra, according to others as well, and because they correspond spiritually. And it's a 1-2 punch. It's a 1-2 effort. Why must we have two, not one? that's a discussion, but that's the basic idea, that there are two Mashiachs, okay? And he says, Haim Hashomrim Maginim al Kim Yisrael. They are the protectors, the guards, the protectors, and those protect the kiyum, the arising of the Jewish people, b'chol doros, right? In every generation, they protect us. Their job, in whatever capacity, according to the Sefer, in one of the parts that Esther and Mordechai had these levels too, and Esther herself could have the level of Mashiach ben Yosef, even though she's a female. Mashiach ben Yosef sounds masculine, but it's a capacity. It's a thing that you do on behalf of the Jewish people. So even a piece of land can have the status of Mashiach ben Yosef because it operates in the capacity of Mashiach ben Yosef, which is to return the Jewish people to Eretz Yisrael. Number two is to rebuild the Yishuv of Eretz Yisrael, and three, to get rid of Amalek from the world. So these are three things that are associated specifically with Mashiach ben Yosef. Okay, and even B'chol Doris, Gam b'mei hagalus, even in times of exile. This is what they're supposed to do. This is the idea. This is their job. Okay. M'komama ikari hu b'shar Yushalayim the Pisra the Karta. Their main locations, so to speak, is what's called the gates of Yushalayim and the opening of the city. Now, does it literally physically mean literally? There's where? Right? To be this big huge bridge. It's kind of like a gate. Maybe that's what it's supposed to be. From a hashkacha point of view, but doesn't literally mean a gate specifically. Maybe not. Doesn't make a difference. But that's what they are. This sod omdos hayub ragleinu b'sharecha Yushalayim. That's the sort of what it says, that their legs were standing by the gates of Yushalayim. Ragleinu. What's ragleinu means plural. Our legs. Who's it referring to? Whose legs? So he says, Haim beis Mashiachin. These are the two Mashiachs. Besod, Netzach v'Hod. Now we're talking spheres, right? Netzach would be Mashiach ben David, and Hod would be Mashiach ben Yosef, I guess, because it's lower down. Ach emasai yecholim lamod b'bitachon ki Yerushalayim habanuya. So when can they do that? Only when it's banuya, when it's rebuilt once again. Ke'ir shuchubra la yachdav. Valehim Nemar, and regarding them it says all. This is actually, is this the paragraph? Yes, it is the paragraph. Okay, so he says, it goes on to say, Valehim Nemar, all chomosecha, on your walls of Yerushalayim, Yivkadati Shomrim, I've appointed Shomrim kol hayom, kol Laila. Shem says kol Laila hainu gamba chashechas agalus. Laila always refers to exile, so it's referring to the darkness of exile. We'll have them even wherever in America, wherever we are. That there'll be people who specifically are appointed by, whether they know it or not. That's not inconsequential, but that's what they'll do for us. But the entire time the Yerushalayim is destroyed, they have no koyach to do anything other than to protect. They can't really function like to get things going, but they can help protect us. But they can't really fight off the Sitra Achra. They can protect us, but they can't defeat the Sitra Achra. They can't really get there to Israel that time until it's rebuilt, because as long as Eretz Yisrael is destroyed and it's a ruin, then the negative forces of impurity can occupy it and interfere with the return of the Jewish people, which goes to show you the huge importance of getting back to Eretz Yisrael and rebuilding it in Jewish hands for the Jewish people. It's changed everything. I mean, it's so messianic, that alone, that we take it for granted because we see it happen in stages, and we're not. It was like not like just one day, another month, another year, and we do marvel at what is accomplished and how quickly it takes place, especially given the fact that we're fighting wars at the same time and spending so much money on security. But still, it looks so tevedik. But the Gra says at the beginning of the Sefer, that's the koich of Mashiach ben Yosef. Mashiach ben Yosef is a natural, miraculous type koich. In other words, it's a mixture. It happens through nature, but a little bit above nature in a way that it's like, science calls it a phenomenon. A phenomenon is basically something that's happening in the natural world. You can't disregard it. You can't ignore that. You can see how it's happening, but it's one of those things that if it didn't happen, a lot would go wrong, and the odds of it happening are against it. But it did anyhow, and there are things within creation itself, life itself, that are like that, and that is kind of what we call a Mashiach, but not even like that is what we call Mashiach ben Yosef type koyach. Okay, so once the land is built, so then we push out, right? When the legs stand, okay. It says when you rebuild Yerushalayim, and we say Yerushalayim here, we mean more. I mean Eretz Yisrael in general, but also specifically Yerushalayim. Because once Yerushalayim is built below, so then it can connect up with the Yerushalayim and Shemayim, and the flow once again of divine light can go from above to below. The main place where that takes place is by the opening to the city, al kav habinim. Erev Chomis, the west of it says from the west of the wall. Now the thing is that Yerushalayim in those days, or at least back in the beginning, like today, Yerushalayim is big, incorporates so much. But don't forget, Yerushalayim was once just a walled city that we call the old city today, because that was Yerushalayim, and then we built beyond that. That's what's a lot of what the Graz students were doing, starting communities beyond it. But it's brought down in the Medrash that all the Shefa, all the light of God that comes to the world comes then over the Western Wall specifically, and then it goes out to the rest of the Jewish people and then the rest of the world. He goes on to say that this is how it continues on. And he says, Hanasis al der cheteva mikava small midisadin. And in the beginning, when Mashiach ben Yosef comes, and that's his whole thing, his job is to basically, what's going on is it happens in a natural way. The rebuilding and the preparing for Gula happens in a very natural way because it's happening what's called der small. There's a very big theme of the Gra and the Ramchal that if we don't merit the Gula outright, which is called Achishena, early, because we've done massive tshuva, then it has to happen, but they're small, and I don't mean the leftist, although that's part of it too. Yes, that is part of it too. But it has to happen, they're small through din, which means it has to happen naturally, in a natural way. And we said partly miraculous too. If you look at the miracle, you can see it, right? And it involves, all these different things. He says that, what you would expect when having to physically build it up. He says, and this is what's called, when we start doing this building and redeveloping Eretz Yisrael and making a place for Jews to live. So that's called Hisrus Tata. That's called an awakening from below, right? And that will trigger the Chesed side, eventually the Rachamim, which is now all the fantastic miracles the Gemara predicts is going to happen when Mashiach ben David comes, which is, the war of Gog and Magog is the threshold. Anyhow, he goes on to explain, and he says that, I just have to find it again. Okay. So he says, Tachlis Avodasenu, the purpose of our avoda, he says, Bekibutz Galios, in the ingathering the exiles, Hakamas Anshi Aman al Hashem Yichud Beis Mashiachim B'Shar Yushalayim Lechazata Lechazaris Hashchinet Tachlis Agula Gulas Emes V'Kiddush Hashem. So we have to find people, reliable people, who are going to operate in this mode and work towards bringing Mashiachim, both of them, the Yichud of the two of them, to the gates of Yerushalayim, so to speak, in order to facilitate, and this is the most important part, the return of the divine presence, because that's what it's all about. He says the whole point of the Geula is the return of the Shekhinah to the Jewish people in Eretz Yisrael and the big Kiddush Hashem that results. Al pi Rabbeinu Agan, Rabbi Eliyahu Zichru Lavracha, Alinu Lavod Lezus Hashem Begvuram Begiburim Hanich Mashiach V'Lamod Heitav Kol Bechinitz V'Tafkidim Al Derech HaMaisa. So we need, according to the Grab, we need to learn all the things necessary to make this happen. Tafkid klali shel shnei Mashiach Mashiach ben Yosef Mashiach ben David b'chol doros hu hagana mechamas neged shloshes roshi klipos. So the main point of Mashiach ben Yosef Mashiach ben David, he says, in every generation, whether it's in Galus or the Gula, is to protect the Jewish people, to go to war against the three sources that he calls the main klipos, the head klipos, which are the three sources of impurity, the three sources of evil in the world. He says Esav and his descendants, of course, Yishmael, we know what that is, and the Erev Rav. Those are the three klipos, three main obstacles to Geula. Tafkidu hamiyuchad shemashiach ben Yosef neged Esav klipos, as we said, that the main point of Mashiach ben Yosef is against Esav. I said Amalek before, but it's Esav, which is the klipa from the left side, because Yosef is from the left side, so Esav is from the left side in the spheres, spiritually speaking. I don't mean politically; it can be also be political too, but I mean spiritually speaking. So therefore, they match up, left to left. Okay, Tafkinu hamiyuchad shemashiach ben David, he's on the right side. Neged Yishmael klipas yamin. And also, Yishmael's on the right side of the impure spheres, and so Mashiach ben David comes against him, and that's where we're holding history right now. The Arabs are clearly the main issue, not so much Amalek, not so much Edom, Esav, but Yishmael, which means we're in the Mashiach ben David period of time, and that's the ongoing battle right now. V'shneim yachadav neged Esav Yishmael shehem shover chamor tuman. Together they fight against these two klipos. He's dagut. He's shel Esav Yishmael hu ayadei amilus sar Erev Rav. So the unification, which again you would never have seen it coming, but here it is in our time, the unification of Esav and Yishmael, which is the Arab world with the Western world, and what Russia, that's not a chiddush, but the Western world, because they come from Esav as well. He says that occurs through Shemayim, through heaven, through the ministering angel of the Erev Rav, whose name is Armilus. Okay, and he said that and it's possible that this combination and this scenario could destroy the Jewish people, God forbid, as well as the world. So Iker Hashi'ifa shel Erev Rav. Now the Erev Rav, the main drive of the Erev Rav, is lizaveg as Esav Yishmael, to create a pairing up of Esav and Yishmael, whoever the Erev Rav is. That's what they do. So you could almost reverse it and say, if you want to know who the Erev Rav is, look at those people who are trying to make a connection between Esav and his descendants and Yishmael, the Arab world, right? Because there's the ox and the donkey. These are symbols of both of these sides. He's the good shell Esav Yishmael hu aydaimilus sar shel Erev Rav. Okay, we already said that. Iker. Okay, we did that. Okay, so he says that the Iker his she'ifa shel Erev Rav hu is to do that lahafrid ben shnei mashiachim, because the Erev Rav knows that by combining Esav and Yishmael, you can cause a separation between Mashiach ben Yosef and Mashiach ben David. So therefore, now bringing it back home to us, our main avoda, our main work at the end of days, l'shaber l'mager es koyach Erev Rav. That if you want to save the world, you want to save the Jewish people, you want to save yourself, you have to go to war against the Erev Rav. The Erev Rav has to be stopped. Whoever they are, whatever they're doing, they have to be stopped, he says. Okay? Klipas are milas of Russia, right? Mi Yisrael, right, from within the Jewish people. Erev Rav hu sonenu, the Erev Rav hates us. Hachi Gadol, the most of all. The Erev Rav hates us the most of all, which is quite amazing, because you will find that there are people who could fit in this category, who it seems to be that even though they might even be Jewish as well, their hatred for people on the right is so intense, it actually goes even beyond our own enemies in the end. And that's what he says, okay? I keep losing my spot, okay? I'm a free b'shnei mashiachim klipas ervav rapulus b'derech shlachis is anayim. But you should know, and this is the tricky part, how do they work? What he calls achilus anayim, deception. That's their main thing. They don't use rocket launchers and submachine guns or any other type of weaponry. They use a psychological thing. They use achizas anayim. They make it look like they're doing a good thing, when in fact what they're doing, they're scheming to do a bad thing in the end. The kifin, and they in roundabout ways. The ched Erev Rav hiya mechamas achi kasha umar elenu. And this is what makes the battle against Erev Rav so intense, so difficult, and so bitter. Worse than any other battle we have to fight. What we have to do is we have to really strengthen ourselves and really push ourselves. You cannot sit back on this one. You cannot do half-hearted gestures to fight against the Erev Rav, as we tend to do, because we'll lose the battle, God forbid. Anybody, he says, is not involved in this battle against the Erev Rav to stop it from happening. Now, shutaf the klipas of Erev Rav, you join them, whether you want to or not, right? Which also reflects back in this week's Parsha, by the way, because the Erev Rav is mamish the Erev Rav, and they're doing the golden calf. So all these Jews, where's the rest of the Jewish nation? In their tents, at home, shaking in their boots, wondering what is going to happen when God gets wind of this. What's going to happen to all of us when Moshe Rabbeinu comes down the mountain and sees the golden calf? Well, at least we weren't involved. We didn't stop it, but at least we didn't do it. We weren't directly or indirectly. We were at home, minding our own business. And yet when Moshe comes down, he blames everybody. We're all picked up, in this one, because we didn't stop it. As the expression goes, something to this effect, all it takes for evil to succeed is a few good people do nothing. And that's the truth, especially when it comes to the Erev Rav. You cannot, close the door and take a back seat and say, it's not my battle. He says, because from God's perspective, if you're not fighting against the Erev Rav, you're fighting with them, whether you believe that or not. And then he ends up by saying, and if that becomes the case, mutav lo shelo nivra, better he wasn't created at all. Better the person wasn't born. In other words, the Erev Rav is terrible. They're bad. They got to go, and they are, no good completely, and they'll be destroyed. In fact, there's 5 levels of Erev Rav, as the Zohar points out. Some are worse than others. Some, there's a small amount that maybe is so mild that they can be brought back. They can do tshuva. But the other 4 categories, he says, they're going to have to be destroyed. The Leshem also says the same thing as well. Fine. But what about the people who are not directly involved with the Erev Rav? They're not fighting against them, but they're not fighting with them. What about them? Well, we would think, well, maybe not after this week's Parsha, we would think that okay, they will be reprimanded. They'll have a price to pay. And they'll have to answer, for the whole, but beyond that, they're innocent, if you can call it. And the Gemara says, no, they're not, because it's incumbent upon anybody who, first of all, you have to appreciate what this means. You have to appreciate history. You can't float through time. You can't meander from month to month, from life. We have to protect the Torah, and we have to have yeshivas, and we have to do all these things. This is who we are. That is the Jewish people. Survival of Torah is first and foremost, but that does not come at the exclusion of everything else. There is a war going on in the world. When I say war, I don't just mean the one between Russia and Ukraine, the one in Eretz Israel, the one over here, the one over there, physical wars. The main war is the war of Das. As the Gra points out, the gematria of Erev Rav is Das. But Das is a positive thing. Das means knowledge, godly knowledge. We want Das. Purim is about Das. Pesach is, everything's about Das. You have to have Das. So how is the Erev Rav the gematria Das? Oh, because we see that from the beginning, there was an Eitz Das Tov Ra, a tree of knowledge of good and evil, which means that there's good Das and there's bad Das. There's the Das of Yaakov Avinu, and there's the Das of his brother Esav, and they're opposites. One is in this world completely selfish and destructive, and the other one is, I'm here to serve God and be his partner in the fulfillment of the purpose of creation. So the Erev Rav is negative Das. They're Das, yes, they're a mirror of Das, but they're negative Das. And because of that, they have the capacity to destroy the world. And we see today, I mean, ever since 1990, for sure, when the World Wide Web became a public, the public domain, that corresponds to the Eitzadas Tova, the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Historically, we discussed this before in the past, but you see that it all comes down. Everyone's opinion. Someone makes a statement. Everyone's making statements about the war against Israel, about the Jewish people, and what's going on, and not just about that, but about Torah, about life. I mean, social. It's overwhelming. It's completely overwhelming what's going on. But if you look for the common denominator in all of this, it comes down to this idea of knowledge. There's never been more knowledge available to more people than there is today. It's unbelievable. And yet, the wisdom, the clarity, the truth, the understanding, the purpose of creation, all these things, no. People are so distracted. In fact, the knowledge is serving to distract people away from the truth. Now, how can that be? Because there is the Eitz HaChaim, the tree of life, and the Eitz HaDas Tova Ra, the tree of knowledge of good and evil. The Eitz HaChaim is the purpose of life. It tells you the why of creation, what we're doing here. It is the weapon, the number one weapon we have against the Erev Rav. Eitz HaDas Tova Ra, right? It's the knowledge can't be good and knowledge can't be evil. It's neutral. What makes it good, what makes it evil, is the person who's using it. So if a person has good character traits, they'll use it the right way. If the person has terrible traits, they'll use it in a very selfish, destructive way. So that's how we determine whether knowledge is good and evil. Well, how do you know? How can you figure it out? Look, there's so many opinions, so many versions of the truth in the world today. How can you possibly know? It's just you can spend your entire life trying to get to the bottom line because there's so many bottom lines to get to. So that's the Eitz HaChaim, that's the Torah. So the most important battle, the most important way to fight the Erev Rav is first and foremost getting intellectual clarity, Torah intellectual clarity, as deep and as profound as possible. And thank Baruch Hashem, today we have the possibility, the potential to be able to do that. And then after that, sharing with others, making sure that others understand it, doing the best you can to clear up the confusion wherever you can. Every time you get a person to be able to see emes the way emes is meant to be seen, you have wounded, if not killed, some of the Erev Rav, if not physically, then at least spiritually. Because that's the bottom line over here, is what you think and how you know it, and how it affects you in life, right? That's the main battle we're fighting. So if a person makes a point of doing that, not sitting around just, let me just learn this, this is a great thing to read. No, we are at war. It's a war of das. It's a war against Erev Rav. And we can see the direction that the world is going. And even though right now, today, at this moment in time, it feels like as bad as, and people have told this to me, as bad as the world is, and they agree, the world is in a bad state, it needs to be rebooted, etc., but still you can function, still you can get around, you can do things, you can accomplish things. So, do we have to make such a big deal about it? And the answer to Gemara is saying, absolutely. Because let's face it, if you go through history, every single time that we waited to the point where it got so obvious that we had to do something about something, it was already too late. The damage was done. And now it had to go the full distance, and after that we went into damage control and repair instead. So don't wait. The Gemara is telling us, right? Make Hashem happy that He created you. Don't become somebody that's better off you weren't existing at all. And the way to do that, number one, is you have to understand these are very special, important times. You cannot be passive. You have to be proactive. You have to make a point of getting up and getting to the bottom line of what life is about and what we're doing here and what we, as an individual, can do to facilitate the fixing of the world. Ourselves first, our families, communities, but fixing the world, because that's all history comes down to. Tikkun Olam, the rectification of the world. The Erev Rav stands in the way of that. They stand to block it, specifically, to make history go on as long as it possibly can so they can have their way. And our job, well, we're supposed to be the spiritual mechanics. We do that by making sure that we have das tov and not das ra.